chefs, I think. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. I want to start with a poem. And for those of you who didn't go to school here, there's some significance in this. We have a professor that starts every class with a poem. And whether you're going to estates or national security law or whatever it is, you're going to start with a poem. And if you go to enough classes, you eventually figure out who his favorites are. And so, here's another little poem by Wendell Berry. And it's called The Real Work. It may be that when we no longer know what to do, we have come to our real work. And that when we no longer know which way to go, we have come to our real journey. The mind that is not baffled is not employed. The impeded stream is the one that sings. So, I want to talk about what I see as the two biggest challenges facing us as lawyers and citizens as we leave here. But before I do, I'm going to just share a short anecdote. I was just back in Maine last week, visiting some friends, and one friend in particular, who I have a lot of respect for. He's an indigenous rights activist, and he runs the Lobster Pound. And now he wants to start an oyster farm. And so he had to call the Department of Marine Resources the other day about permits. And he got on the phone with them, and it was 15 or 20 minutes, and he starts to look kind of agitated. And then half an hour, 45 minutes, he's getting really frustrated. And after an hour, you could tell that whoever he was talking to, he was not happy with. And he finally got off the phone after about an hour, and he just said, "Man, she was a lawyer." And to him, that meant she didn't know anything useful, and she was pedantic and presumably dishonest. But then he also started, in the same conversation, telling me about a friend of his who's a BLS grad also, who came out of school with a lot of debt, like a lot of us will, and went to work for the Shoshones in Nevada for almost no money. And that was somebody he really respected. And so I don't want to dwell on the lawyer jokes and the stereotypes too much, because we know the jokes. And we know that our community is different, and we have a different reputation. So let's just leave that at that. But we are going to be lawyers, and so we have to be honest about the role of our chosen profession in society. President Obama, in one of his books, observed that the law is too often a glorified accounting that serves to regulate the affairs of those who have power, and seeks to explain to those who don't the ultimate wisdom and justice of their condition. And this leads to what I see as our first big challenge. The law and our economic system are inextricably intertwined. And I have a friend out there who knows why that's funny, but if you're in class and you don't know what you're being asked by the professor, just say inextricably intertwined. I was sitting next to somebody once, and he wasn't really paying attention, and the question came in, and all he knew is that it was about two things, and so he said, "I think they're inextricably intertwined, actually." And the professor looked at him, thought about it for a second, and said, "I see what you mean." But really, the law and our economic system are inextricably intertwined. If there's a problem with our economic system, we as lawyers should be able to see it. And there is a problem, and we can all see the symptoms. We're undeniably at a dangerous moment in history. We face an uncertain, unstable future. We won't be inheriting from our parents the world that they wanted to leave us. And I think this is because the inherent tendencies of our economic system have created increasing inequality and wars for oil, but decreasing happiness. A two-income family today can't provide what a one-income family used to be able to provide a generation ago. We eat undervalued food from industrial farms while real farms disappear around us. And most impressively, we have climate change. Now, there are valid arguments to be made about the net costs and benefits of free market capitalism as a historical matter. But it's becoming increasingly clear that an emphasis on economic growth isn't going to get us out of the mess that we're in. And it's in fact remarkable that we would expect it to. From Adam Smith to John Maynard Keynes, the great minds behind our model of economic development have advocated for the promotion of values like competition and greed. because they imagined that these values would generate material prosperity. But they saw this as a temporary transitional stage. They looked forward to a time when we would move into a steady state economy based on more noble values. That time is here, whether we're ready or not. Free market capitalism has stopped delivering the improvements that justified its existence, and has failed to recognize the natural limits to its own growth. The old way of doing things shouldn't be sustained, and it won't be sustained because it's physically unsustainable. So our first big challenge is to look this crisis in the eye and be honest about what we see. It so happens that our community has prepared us well for this challenge. We've studied the rules of the game. We know about the ways in which wealth and power concentrate themselves and perpetuate themselves. But we've been learning these things from a unique perspective. The best kind of legal training, I think, at this point in history, I'm gonna have to compete with the train, is informed by ecological values. Sustainability, diversity. That happens a couple times a day. Sustainability, diversity, and community. And that's the kind of legal training we got, and that's the kind of legal training that will help us identify the flaws in our economic system. And once we recognize the need for an alternative, we have to cultivate that alternative, and this is our second major challenge. It's daunting for many reasons, and it will be frustrating for us to discover that our profession has a limited capacity to help. We all know that the law moves slowly and incrementally. Lawyers typically work with the system as they find it. Good ones will help the underdogs and make marginal adjustments. But let's face it, if we try to change the world with nothing but our profession, we will be disappointed. Our tools aren't sharp enough. The fundamental causes of our crisis are too deep. And yet, at this point, knowing what we know, we can't be complacent. We can't settle for marginal adjustments. We have to look for ways to cultivate a radical alternative. Specifically, we have to figure out how we can achieve a better standard of living with a steady state economy. And to do this, we have to mix our legal training with common sense and what other resources we find, and we have to get creative. Again, our community has prepared us for this challenge. For example, we have a professor, and I won't say her name, but in class, sometimes she coins words like post-ad hoc and prejudice. So maybe you know what I mean. She told us that the second half of law school she spent only taking classes that had the name of the form blank in the law. Race in the law, sports in the law, roving bands of terrorists in the law. Whatever it is. And I think she was kind of joking, but it's a really good model. I think we need to carry that approach into the world, mixing the law with everything else. To take it a step further, I think it would be wise for us to be humble. We shouldn't aspire to be leaders, but to be followers. There's no lack of leadership. It's all around us right here in South Royalton. That co-op over there, we shopped at for 3 years. It's a great store, but it's not just a store. It really is, in the right lens, a revolutionary post-capitalist economic institution. Another example is the network of small farms and small economies that Vermont is famous for. We also have examples of decreasing labor productivity. Historically, our economy is focused on increasing labor productivity, doing more work with less workers. But if we're serious about conserving energy and putting people to work, we're going to have to throw that into reverse. This is a win-win in most cases. After all, she who splits her own wood is twice warmed. So around here we have bike-powered blenders and we have animal-powered field days up in Tunbridge. And we know how to revolutionize our economic system. Prioritize cooperation over competition. Give people jobs that are fulfilling to them. Look around, find promise in experiments that are already in shape, and help them grow. A lawyer named Stoughton Lind made this point by way of forest ecology. Peel back the surface scatter of leaves or pine needles, he wrote, and there will often be revealed a dense tangle of interconnected roots from which new growth will eventually emerge. So I'll wrap it up. As we go out into the world, I know we're going to carry the spirit of our community with us. Be kind and be honest. Be critical in assessing our problems, and be creative in finding solutions. And in this way, I think we can help create a new society in the shell of the old. Thank you. Congratulations.